The schoolteacher's fingers had already turned blue when she realized nobody was coming to save her. And that was when the first window shattered under the weight of the mountain snow in eastern Colorado territory. December 1882. Lily Sutherland had arrived in Ordway just 3 months earlier. A 22-year-old woman from Boston who had answered an advertisement for a teacher in this remote settlement where the Arkansas River cut through the plains and the Rocky Mountains loomed in the distance. The little schoolhouse sat on the edge of town, a one-room structure that served double duty as her living quarters in the back. She had thought it charming at first, the way the children would arrive each morning with their lunch pails and eager faces, the way the community had welcomed her with pies and preserves and promises that she would love it here once she got used to the wind. Nobody had warned her about storms like this. The blizzard had started 2 days ago, innocent enough at first, just flurries that made the children laugh as they caught snowflakes on their tongues. By noon, the sky had turned the color of old pewter, and the wind began to howl like something wounded and angry. The parents had come quickly, bundling their children into wagons and onto horses, urging them home before the roads became impassable. Lily had stood in the doorway, watching them disappear into the white curtain that was rapidly erasing the world, and she had felt the first flutter of real fear in her chest. That had been 48 hours ago. The woodpile she kept behind the building was buried now, unreachable beneath 6 feet of snow that had drifted against the walls. She had burned 3 of the student desks already, breaking them apart with trembling hands and feeding them into the small stove that was losing its battle against the cold. The wind screamed through every crack in the walls, and frost had begun to form on the inside of the remaining windows. She had wrapped herself in every piece of fabric she owned, layers of petticoats and shawls, and even the curtains she had sewn herself when she first arrived. But still the cold crept in, settling into her bones like an unwelcome guest that had no intention of leaving. When the window broke, the sound was like a gunshot in the howling silence, and suddenly the storm was inside with her, snow spraying across the floor in great gusting waves. Lily screamed, stumbling backward as the wind tore through the room with savage fury. She grabbed the mattress from her narrow bed and dragged it across the floor, struggling to prop it against the broken window. Her fingers felt thick and clumsy, refusing to obey her commands, and she knew with a clarity that cut through her panic that she was in serious trouble. The cold was no longer just uncomfortable. It was deadly. She managed to wedge the mattress into place, but snow continued to seep around the edges, and now she had no blankets, nothing to keep warm with except her inadequate layers of clothing. She fed another desk into the stove, watching the flames flicker and dance, wondering how long the wood would last, wondering if anyone in town even knew she was out here, alone and freezing, wondering if this was how her story would end, frozen to death in a Colorado schoolhouse before she had even lived. While Lily fought for survival in her rapidly deteriorating shelter, 5 miles away in the center of Ordway, a man named Kieran Knox sat in the corner of the saloon and listened to the storm rage outside. He was 26 years old, tall and lean with dark hair that perpetually fell across his forehead and eyes the color of smoke. He was not a man who spoke much, had never been one for easy conversation or social gatherings, but he was known throughout the territory as someone you wanted on your side in a difficult situation. He had worked as a ranch hand, a trail guide, a temporary deputy when the town needed an extra gun, and he did all of it with the same quiet competence that made people trust him even as they wondered what thoughts moved behind those watchful gray eyes. He had been in town picking up supplies when the storm hit, and like everyone else, he had taken shelter to wait it out. But unlike everyone else, he could not stop thinking about the schoolteacher, Lily Sutherland. He had seen her around town, of course. Had watched her walking to the mercantile with her careful, city-bred steps, her copper hair pinned up beneath her bonnet, her green eyes taking in everything with a mixture of wonder and determination. He had been in the back of the room during the town meeting when she had introduced herself, her voice clear and educated, her hands folded primly in front of her as she explained her teaching philosophy and her hopes for the children of Ordway. Kieran had thought she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen, and he had not spoken a single word to her. That was his way. He watched, he listened, he kept his distance. He had learned young that people left, that caring too much only led to hurt, and he had built walls around himself that he had no intention of tearing down. His mother had died when he was 8. His father had drunk himself to death 3 years later, and Kieran had been on his own ever since. He was comfortable with solitude, preferred it even, and he had convinced himself that was enough. But now, sitting in the smoky warmth of the saloon while the wind tried to tear the building from its foundation, he could not stop thinking about the schoolhouse on the edge of town. Could not stop picturing Lily Sutherland alone out there, separated from help by walls of snow and wind that showed no signs of stopping. Hell of a storm, someone said, and Kieran looked up to see Tom Brennan, the saloon owner, wiping down the bar with a rag. Worst I have seen in 20 years. Hope everybody made it home safe. The schoolteacher, Kieran said, his voice rough from disuse. She lives at the schoolhouse, does she not? Tom paused, frowning. Miss Sutherland, yeah, she has quarters in the back. Why? Anyone check on her, in this? Tom gestured toward the window, where nothing was visible except white chaos. Nobody can get out there, Knox. Hell, you can barely see your hand in front of your face. She will be fine. That building is sturdy enough, and I am sure she has supplies. Kieran said nothing, but unease coiled in his gut like a snake. The schoolhouse was on the edge of town, exposed to the full force of the wind coming off the plains. And Lily Sutherland was from Boston, a city girl who probably had no idea how to handle a Colorado blizzard. She would have no experience with this kind of cold, this kind of isolation. He stood, reaching for his coat. "Where the hell do you think you are going?" Tom asked, his eyes widening. "Knox, you cannot go out in that. It is suicide. Someone needs to check on her. You will freeze to death before you get 100 yards, or you will get turned around and lost. Nobody knows where they are in a whiteout like this." Kieran pulled on his heavy sheepskin coat, the one he had bought from a trapper 3 years ago and had kept him alive through a dozen hard winters. He wrapped a scarf around his face, tugged his hat down low, and checked that his gloves were secure. "If I am not back by morning, send someone after me when the storm clears." "Knox, this is crazy. You do not even know her." That was true. He had never spoken to her, never had a conversation beyond a brief nod of acknowledgement when their paths crossed. But he knew that she had come here alone, taking a risk to teach children in a place far from everything she had known. He knew that she smiled at everyone she met, that she had organized a spelling bee that had the whole town talking, that she had stayed late one evening to help a struggling student, and had walked home in the dark without complaint. He knew that if he did not go, she might die, and he would spend the rest of his life knowing he had sat warm and safe while she froze. "I have to try," he said simply, and walked out into the storm before Tom could argue further. The cold hit him like a physical blow, stealing his breath and making his eyes water instantly. The wind shrieked around him, a living thing that tore at his clothes and tried to shove him back toward the shelter he had just left. Snow whipped past in horizontal sheets, so thick he could not see the ground beneath his feet, could not see anything except white chaos in every direction. Kieran knew that Tom was right. This was probably suicide. In conditions like this, men got lost 20 feet from their own front doors, wandered in circles until exhaustion and cold took them down. The schoolhouse was 5 miles away through open country, and he had no landmarks to guide him, no way to navigate except instinct and memory. But he had spent 15 years surviving in this territory, had learned to read the land and the weather, to find his way when others would be lost. He knew that the road to the schoolhouse ran east, and even though he could not see the road, he could feel the wind coming from the north, could use it to orient himself. He bent his head against the gale and started walking, counting his steps, calculating the distance. The first mile was agony. The cold seeped through his layers despite the heavy coat, and his face went numb beneath the scarf. His eyes burned from squinting against the wind and snow, and his lungs ached with each breath of frigid air. He had to stop every few minutes to check his bearings, to make sure he was still heading east and not drifting off course. Once he stumbled into a drift that came up to his chest, and he had to dig himself out with hands that were already starting to lose feeling. Keep moving, he told himself. Just keep moving. He thought about Lily to keep himself focused. Thought about the way she had looked that first day at the town meeting, standing straight and proud despite being clearly nervous. Thought about the sound of children's laughter coming from the schoolhouse when he rode past. Evidence of her success in making learning something joyful rather than tedious. Thought about the possibility that she might be trapped and cold and afraid, waiting for help that she had every right to expect would come. The second mile was worse. His legs felt like lead, each step requiring conscious effort and determination. The wind seemed to be getting stronger, if that was possible, and several times it knocked him off his feet entirely. He would lie in the snow, gasping, trying to summon the strength to rise, and then he would think about Lily alone in the schoolhouse, and he would force himself up, force himself to take another step, and another. By the third mile, he was no longer entirely sure he was going in the right direction. Everything looked the same, white and howling and disorienting. He might have drifted north or south, might be walking parallel to the schoolhouse rather than toward it. He might be heading into open country where he would wander until the cold took him, but he kept walking. The fourth mile brought a new kind of cold, the kind that made him stop feeling his extremities entirely. His fingers were stiff inside his gloves, his toes numb in his boots. Ice had formed on his eyelashes and the scarf covering his face, making each breath a struggle. He was so tired, bone-deep exhausted in a way that made him want to simply lie down in the snow and rest. He knew that if he did that, he would never get up again. Just a little farther, he told himself. She is out there. Keep going. The fifth mile nearly killed him. He fell more than he walked, crawling on his hands and knees when he could not stand, dragging himself forward through sheer stubborn will. His mind began to play tricks on him, showing him images of warmth and shelter, tempting him to give up. He saw his mother's face, heard her voice calling him home. He saw the saloon, warm and bright and so close he could almost touch it. But beneath all of that he saw Lily, and he kept moving. He almost missed the schoolhouse entirely. He had drifted south of the road and only stumbled upon the building by pure chance, his shoulder hitting the wall and making him realize that he had found solid structure. For a moment, he could only lean against it, gasping, trying to convince himself he was not hallucinating. Then he felt his way along the wall, searching for the door, praying it would be unlocked. It was. He fell through the doorway into darkness and cold that was barely warmer than the hell he had just walked through. The door slammed shut behind him and he lay on the floor, ice cracking off his clothes, his body shaking so violently he could not control it. "Who is there?" a voice called out, high and frightened. "I have a knife. Stay back." "Lily," he managed to croak, his voice barely recognizable even to himself. "Lily Sutherland, it is Kieran Knox. I came to help." There was silence and then the sound of movement. A match flared, and suddenly he could see her, wrapped in what looked like every piece of fabric in the building, her face pale and her lips tinged with blue. She held a lamp in one hand and a letter opener in the other, and she stared at him with eyes that were wide with shock and disbelief. "Kieran Knox," she repeated as if testing the words. "You are the ranch hand. You work for the Double K spread." He nodded, unable to form more words. He was shaking too hard, his teeth chattering so violently he thought they might crack. Lily seemed to shake herself out of her shock. She set down the lamp and the letter opener and knelt beside him, her hands hovering uncertainly as if she did not know where to touch him. "You are frozen. Oh God, you are going to lose your fingers. We need to warm you up slowly. Can you move? Can you get closer to the stove?" Together, they managed to get him across the room to where the small stove radiated what little heat it could produce. Lily helped him out of his ice-covered coat and gloves, her own hands trembling as she worked. She wrapped blankets around him, the curtains she had been using herself, and then she did something that surprised him. She crawled under the blankets with him, pressing her body against his, sharing what warmth she had. "Body heat," she explained, her voice shaking. "I read about it. In extreme cold, body heat can be the difference between life and death." Kieran could not respond. He could only shake and try to absorb the warmth she offered, grateful beyond words that he had found her, that she was alive, that he had somehow managed to cross 5 miles of frozen hell and emerge on the other side. They lay like that for what felt like hours, holding each other in the darkness while the storm raged outside, and the stove burned through the last of the broken desk. Gradually, feeling began to return to Kieran's extremities, first as numbness and then as a burning pain that made him bite down on his lip to keep from crying out. Lily held him through it, murmuring soft words of encouragement, and he realized that she was crying. "Why did you come?" she whispered. "Why would you risk your life like that? We have never even spoken." He did not have a good answer for that. How could he explain that he had been watching her from a distance for 3 months, drawn to her in a way he did not understand and could not articulate? How could he tell her that the thought of her alone and afraid had driven him out into a storm that should have killed him? "Could not leave you out here," he said finally, his voice hoarse. "Not alone." She pulled back just enough to look at him, and even in the dim light from the stove, he could see the tears on her cheeks, the emotion in her green eyes. "That is the bravest thing anyone has ever done for me." He wanted to tell her that it was not bravery, that he had been terrified every step of the way. He wanted to tell her that he had thought about turning back 100 times, that only the image of her face had kept him moving forward. But the words stuck in his throat the way they always did, and instead he just looked at her, hoping she could see in his eyes what he could not say. "We need more fuel," Lily said, practical even in crisis. "There is one more desk, but after that, I do not know what we will burn. I tried to get to the woodpile behind the building, but the snow is too deep." Kieran forced himself to sit up, pushing through the exhaustion and pain. "I will dig it out. In the morning when there is light. You cannot go back out there. You almost died. The storm might last for days." He looked around the small space, taking in the broken window with the mattress wedged against it, the thin walls that did nothing to keep out the wind, the nearly empty stove. "We will freeze without more fuel." Lily bit her lip, and he could see her weighing the options, understanding the reality of their situation. "Then we both go. I will not let you risk yourself alone again. You should stay inside, stay warm. And if something happens to you out there, if you collapse or get buried, no. We do this together or not at all." There was steel in her voice, a determination that surprised him. She might be a city girl, might be out of her depth in this harsh country, but she was no fragile flower. She was willing to fight for survival, willing to take risks to ensure they both made it through. He found himself respecting her more than he had expected. They spent the rest of the night huddled together by the stove, talking in quiet voices to stay awake and alert. Lily told him about Boston, about her family who had not understood her desire to come west, about the students she had already grown to love in her short time in Ordway. Kieran found himself talking more than he had in years, telling her about growing up on the frontier, about the beauty and brutality of this land, about the way the mountains looked at sunrise. It was strange, this intimacy born of crisis. They were essentially strangers, and yet here they were, wrapped in each other's arms, sharing warmth and stories and the hope that they would see another day. Kieran had spent so long keeping people at a distance, convinced that solitude was safer than connection. But now, with Lily pressed against him and her voice soft in his ear, he wondered what he had been so afraid of. When dawn finally came, gray and dim through the snow-covered windows, the storm had not let up. If anything, it seemed worse, the wind howling with renewed fury. But they could see, at least, and that was something. Kieran stood on shaking legs, testing his strength. His hands and feet hurt like fire, but everything seemed to be working. He had been lucky, luckier than he had any right to be. "I am going out. You stay here and keep the stove going. I told you we go together. Lily, do not argue with me, Kieran Knox. You are still weak from last night, and if you think I am going to sit here and watch you walk out into that storm alone, you do not know me at all." He looked at her, at the determination in her eyes, and knew that arguing would be pointless. "Fine, but you stay close to me. If I tell you to go back inside, you go. Understand?" Understood. They prepared as best they could, wrapping themselves in every layer they had left, tying a rope around their waists to keep them connected. The woodpile was only about 30 feet behind the building, but in this storm, 30 feet might as well be 30 miles. They would have to dig through the drifts, find the wood, and carry as much as they could back to the schoolhouse without getting lost or separated. Opening the door was like opening a portal to another world, a world of white fury and biting cold. They stepped out together, the rope taut between them, and immediately Kieran knew this was going to be even harder than the night before. The snow had drifted against the back of the building, creating walls that were taller than he was. They would have to dig down to reach the woodpile, and every minute they spent outside increased the risk of frostbite or worse. But they had no choice. They dug with their hands, with pieces of broken wood, with anything they could find. The snow was heavy and wet, difficult to move, and the wind kept filling in their progress almost as fast as they could clear it. Lily worked beside him without complaint, her face set in grim determination, her hands red and raw. When they finally reached the wood, Kieran felt a surge of relief so intense it made him dizzy. They loaded themselves down with as much as they could carry, pieces of split pine that would burn hot and long, and then they followed the rope back to the door. The whole excursion could not have taken more than 20 minutes, but by the time they stumbled back inside, they were both shaking and gasping, ice covering every exposed inch of skin. They had wood, though, enough to last several days if they were careful. They made 2 more trips, building up their supply, and by the time they were finished, They were both exhausted and frozen but hopeful. The stove was full, the fire burning bright and warm, and they had enough fuel to wait out the storm no matter how long it lasted. Lily collapsed on the floor near the stove, her head falling back against the wall. I have never been so cold in my entire life, or so tired. Kieran settled beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. You did well out there, better than most men I know. I was terrified the entire time. So was I. She turned to look at him, surprised. You were. You seemed so calm, so certain of what to do. Being scared does not mean you cannot do what needs to be done. It just means you do it while being scared. Lily smiled, a real smile this time, and Kieran felt something shift in his chest, something that felt dangerously like hope. Thank you, she said softly, for coming for me, for risking everything. You would have done the same. Would I? I like to think so, but I honestly do not know. What you did last night was extraordinary. He did not know what to say to that, so he said nothing. They sat in comfortable silence, warming themselves by the stove, listening to the storm continue its assault on the world outside. And for the first time in his life, Kieran Knox did not feel alone. The storm lasted 3 more days. 3 days of howling wind and endless snow. 3 days of being trapped together in the small schoolhouse with nothing to do but talk and tend the fire and wait for the weather to break. They rationed their food carefully. Lily had some supplies in her pantry, and Kieran had jerky and hardtack in his saddlebags, but it was not hunger that worried them. It was the isolation, the way time seemed to stretch and warp, the knowledge that the outside world had ceased to exist and they were the only 2 people left. But somehow, it was not terrible. Somehow, those 3 days became something precious, something Kieran would look back on for the rest of his life with a mixture of wonder and gratitude. They talked about everything. Lily told him about her childhood in Boston, about her father who had been a professor at Harvard, about her mother who had died when Lily was 16. She talked about her decision to come west, about wanting to make a difference, about feeling stifled in the city and yearning for something more. She was funny and smart and passionate about teaching, about giving children opportunities they might not otherwise have. Kieran told her about his parents, about the loneliness of growing up alone, about the years he had spent drifting from job to job, never quite finding a place where he belonged. He told her about the beauty he found in this hard land, about sunrises over the plains, and the way the stars looked when you were 100 miles from the nearest town. He told her things he had never told anyone, secrets he had kept locked away, and she listened without judgment, without pity, just understanding. On the second night, Lily asked him why he had never married, and Kieran found himself answering honestly. Never found a reason to. Never met anyone who made me want to stay in one place. And now, she asked, her voice soft. He looked at her, at the firelight dancing across her face, at the copper hair that had come loose from its pins, at the green eyes that watched him with something that looked like hope. Now I am beginning to think I have been looking in the wrong places. She leaned closer, close enough that he could feel her breath on his face, could see the freckles scattered across her nose. Kieran Knox, she whispered, are you trying to court me while we are trapped in a blizzard? I do not know how to court anyone, never tried. Then maybe we will figure it out together. And then she kissed him, soft and tentative and sweet, and Kieran felt the last of his walls crumble. He pulled her closer, deepening the kiss, pouring into it all the things he did not know how to say. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless, and Lily was smiling in a way that made her entire face glow. That was nice, she said. Yeah, he agreed, unable to stop the grin that spread across his face. That was real nice. They spent the rest of that night wrapped in each other's arms, sharing warmth and kisses and whispered words. They did not rush into anything more, both understanding that what was building between them was too important to be careless with. But they held each other and they talked, and they began to build something that felt like the beginning of forever. On the third day, the wind began to die down. By evening, the snow had stopped entirely, and they could see stars through the breaks in the clouds. The temperature was still brutally cold, but the worst had passed. "Someone will come tomorrow," Lily said, standing at the window and looking out at the transformed landscape. The world was buried in white, drifts piled high against buildings, the road completely erased. "The town will send people to check on everyone." "Yeah," Kieran agreed, though he felt a strange reluctance at the thought of rescue. These past few days had been a kind of magic, a time outside of time, and he was not quite ready for it to end. Lily turned to look at him, and he could see the same conflict in her eyes. "What happens when we go back? When we are not trapped here anymore?" He crossed the room to stand beside her, taking her hands in his. "What do you want to happen? I want this to be real. Not just something born of fear and desperation, but something genuine, something lasting." "It is real for me," he said, meaning every word. "Has been since before I walked through that storm. I just did not know how to tell you. Then tell me now." He took a breath, gathering his courage. "I have been alone most of my life, Lily. Thought that was what I wanted, what I needed. But these past few days with you, they have been the best days I can remember. You make me want things I never thought I could have. A home, a family, a future." Tears filled her eyes, but she was smiling. "I came west looking for purpose, for meaning. I thought I would find it in teaching and making a difference for the children. And I did find that. But I also found something I was not expecting. I found you. I am not educated like you. I have no fancy words, no pretty way of saying things. But I love you, Lily Sutherland. I love your courage and your kindness and the way you refused to give up even when things were at their worst. I love that you made me believe in possibility again." "I love you too," she whispered. "I love your quiet strength and your gentle heart and the way you risked everything to save me. I love that you see beauty in this hard land, and I love that you helped me see it too." He kissed her then, long and deep, sealing the promise they were making to each other. When they finally pulled apart, they were both crying, but they were happy tears, tears of relief and joy and hope. The rescue party arrived the next morning, a group of men on horseback led by Tom Brennan and Sheriff Davis. They broke through the drifts to reach the schoolhouse, their faces showing relief when they found both Lily and Kieran alive and well. "Knox, you crazy fool," Tom said, shaking his head in disbelief. "I thought for sure we would be digging your frozen corpse out of a snowbank. When you did not come back, I figured that was it." "Took longer than I expected," Kieran said, which was the understatement of the century. Sheriff Davis looked between the two of them, noting their clasped hands, the way they stood close together. A smile tugged at his weathered face. "Looks like something good came out of this mess after all." "Yes, sir," Lily said, her voice clear and proud. "Something very good." They rode back to town together, Lily sitting in front of Kieran on his borrowed horse, wrapped in his arms against the cold. The town had weathered the storm well enough, with only minor damage to a few buildings and no loss of life. Everyone gathered to hear the story of Kieran's mad dash through the blizzard, of the days spent trapped in the schoolhouse, and Ordway being a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business. It did not take long for word to spread that the quiet cowboy and the schoolteacher had fallen in love. The reaction was universally positive. The women cooed over the romance of it all, the men clapped Kieran on the back and told him he had done well, and the children at the school were beside themselves with excitement at the idea of their teacher getting married. The word both thrilled and terrified Kieran. He had never imagined himself as a husband, never thought he would be the kind of man someone would want to build a life with. But Lily had changed everything, had shown him that he was capable of more than he had believed. They courted properly after that, or at least as properly as they could, given that everyone in town already knew they were in love. Kieran would visit the schoolhouse in the evenings, bringing firewood and supplies, staying to talk and share meals. On Sundays, they would walk together along the Arkansas River, talking about their dreams and making plans for the future. He introduced her to the rancher he worked for, a gruff old man named Carl Henderson, who took one look at Lily and declared her a keeper. She introduced him to her students, and Kieran found himself reading halting stories to wide-eyed children, helping with arithmetic lessons, becoming a part of the little community she had built. 2 months after the blizzard, Kieran asked Lily to marry him. He did it without a ring, without anything fancy, just the two of them standing by the river at sunset, the mountains purple in the distance. He told her he did not have much to offer, just his heart and his promise that he would spend every day trying to make her happy. Lily said yes before he had even finished, throwing her arms around him and kissing him with a joy that made his heart soar. They were married in April, when the snow had melted and wildflowers covered the plains. The ceremony was held in the schoolhouse, decorated with ribbons and spring blossoms, packed with everyone from town and the surrounding ranches. Lily wore a simple white dress that she had sewn herself, with lace at the collar and cuffs, and Kieran wore his best suit, purchased especially for the occasion. When he saw her walking toward him, her face radiant with happiness, he felt his throat tighten with emotion. The preacher kept the service short, and then they were pronounced husband and wife, and Kieran was kissing his bride while the whole town cheered. The celebration lasted long into the night, with music and dancing and more food than they could possibly eat. People told stories and made toasts, and Kieran, who had spent so much of his life on the outside looking in, felt truly welcomed, truly home. Carl Henderson gave them a wedding gift that left them both speechless. A piece of land, 40 acres on the edge of his property with a small cabin and a creek running through it. "You will need a place of your own," Carl said gruffly, "and I need a reliable foreman. Job is yours if you want it, Knox. Comes with a good wage in the house." Kieran could barely speak. "Sir, I do not know what to say. Say you will take care of that wife of yours and raise some good kids who will keep Miss Lily here teaching for years to come. Town needs her, and it needs good men like you." They moved into the cabin the next week, and Lily continued teaching while Kieran took on his new role as foreman of the Double K Ranch. It was hard work, long hours and difficult decisions, but Kieran found he had a talent for it, and more importantly, he had a reason to work hard to build something lasting. He had Lily. Their life together fell into a comfortable rhythm. Kieran would wake early to handle the ranch business, and Lily would prepare for her school day. They would have breakfast together, talking about their plans, and then go their separate ways. But every evening they would come back together, sharing meals and stories, sitting on the porch and watching the sun set over the mountains. The schoolhouse needed repairs after the damage from the blizzard, and Kieran spent several weekends fixing the roof, replacing the broken window, reinforcing the walls. The town pitched in, grateful for the teacher who had become such an important part of their community. By the time school resumed in the fall, the building was stronger than ever, ready to face whatever weather Colorado could throw at it. That first winter as a married couple was a test. Kieran worried every time snow fell, memories of that terrible blizzard still fresh in his mind. But Lily was never alone now, never at risk. He made sure the woodpile was always full, that the cabin was secure, that they had supplies enough to last through any storm, and when the snow came, they faced it together, safe and warm in their home. In February, Lily told him she was pregnant. Kieran was checking the horses in the barn when she came to him, her face glowing with joy and nerves. "I have news," she said, and something in her voice made him stop what he was doing and give her his full attention. "What kind of news?" "The kind that means our family is going to grow." "I am going to have a baby, Kieran. We are going to have a baby." For a moment he could not process the words. A baby. He was going to be a father. The thought was so enormous, so overwhelming that he could not quite grasp it. But then Lily was in his arms, laughing and crying at the same time, and the reality of it hit him like a physical force. "A baby," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy? I know we did not plan this, did not expect it quite so soon." "Happy." He pulled back to look at her to make sure she could see the truth in his eyes. "Lily, I am more than happy. I am terrified and amazed and grateful all at once. You are giving me something I never thought I would have. A family. A real family." She kissed him, soft and sweet, and he held her carefully as if she were made of something precious and fragile. "We are going to be good at this," she said. "Together we can do anything." He believed her. The pregnancy was not easy. Lily suffered from morning sickness that lasted well into the afternoon, and as summer arrived, the heat made her uncomfortable and exhausted. But she continued teaching through it all, determined to finish the school year. The children were excited about the baby, making drawings and little gifts, treating Lily with a gentle reverence that amused Kieran to no end. Carl Henderson gave Kieran time off as Lily's due date approached, not wanting him to be caught at the far end of the ranch when the baby decided to arrive. Kieran spent those days close to home, working on projects around the cabin, building a cradle with his own hands, trying to prepare for the enormous change that was coming. The baby came on a cool September evening as the sun was setting, and the sky was painted in shades of orange and gold. Kieran fetched the midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Grant, who had delivered half the babies in Ordway, and then he was relegated to waiting outside while the women worked. He paced the porch, his heart in his throat, listening to Lily's cries and praying that she would be all right, that the baby would be all right. When he finally heard the sharp wail of a newborn, he stopped breathing. Mrs. Grant emerged a few minutes later, smiling broadly. "Congratulations, Knox. You have a son, a healthy, loud son. A son." He went inside on shaking legs, and there was Lily, propped up in bed and holding a tiny bundle wrapped in soft blankets. She looked exhausted and radiant all at once, her hair damp with sweat, her face glowing with love as she gazed down at their child. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Kieran crossed the room and sat carefully on the edge of the bed, looking down at the tiny face that was all scrunched up and red. The baby's eyes were closed, his little fists waving in the air, and Kieran felt something crack wide open in his chest, a love so fierce and immediate it took his breath away. "He is perfect," Kieran whispered. "We need to name him." They had discussed names during the pregnancy, going back and forth on options, but now, looking at his son, Kieran knew exactly what he wanted. "James, after my father, James Carl Knox." Lily smiled, tears slipping down her cheeks. "James Carl Knox, I love it. Hello, James. Welcome to the world." Kieran reached out with one finger, touching the baby's tiny hand, and James wrapped his fingers around it with surprising strength. And in that moment, Kieran knew that his life had changed forever, in the best possible way. The first year of James's life was a blur of sleepless nights and endless wonder. Kieran had never known he could love something so much, that every tiny milestone could fill him with such joy. James's first smile, his first laugh, the way he would reach for Kieran when he came home from work. All of it was magic. Lily took the next school year off to care for James, though she missed teaching terribly. She spent her days with their son, teaching him songs and stories, taking him for walks along the creek. Kieran would come home to find them together, and his heart would swell with gratitude that this was his life now, this family, this love. When James was 2, Lily returned to teaching part-time, and Kieran adjusted his schedule to watch James on the days she worked. The town had hired an assistant teacher, a young woman from Denver who was eager to learn from Lily, and between the two of them, they managed to teach all the children in the area. Life settled into a pattern that was sometimes chaotic, but always filled with love. Kieran worked the ranch, Lily taught, and together they raised James in a home that was rich with laughter and affection. They had their struggles, of course. Money was sometimes tight, and Colorado winters were never easy. But they faced everything together, the way they had faced that first blizzard, and they always came through stronger. When James was 4, Lily became pregnant again. This time, she knew what to expect, and while the pregnancy was still difficult, she handled it with more confidence. Kieran worried, the way he always did, but he trusted that Lily was strong, that she could handle whatever came. Their daughter was born in May, arriving fast and with minimal fuss, as if she already knew that life in Colorado required efficiency. They named her Grace Helen Knox, after Lily's mother and Kieran's mother, and she was a beautiful baby with copper hair and gray eyes that looked like they had stolen the color of storm clouds. James was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to hold her constantly, bringing her his toys, singing her the songs Lily had taught him. Watching his children together, Kieran felt a contentment he had never imagined possible. This was family. This was home. The years passed quickly, each one bringing new joys and challenges. James grew into a thoughtful, curious boy who loved horses and books in equal measure. Grace was energetic and fearless, always climbing things she should not, always asking questions that made Kieran laugh. Lily continued teaching, becoming a beloved figure in Ordway, the kind of teacher that students remembered for the rest of their lives. And Kieran managed the ranch, eventually buying more land, building up a small herd of his own cattle. They prospered, not in terms of great wealth, but in terms of what mattered. They had a good home, healthy children, work that fulfilled them, and most importantly, they had each other. Carl Henderson passed away when James was 10, leaving Kieran a portion of the ranch in his will. It was an unexpected gift, recognition of the years of loyal service and friendship. With that land, Kieran was able to expand his own operation, to become a rancher in his own right rather than just a foreman. It was hard work, but he had never shied away from hard work, and he had James by his side now, eager to learn the business. Lily eventually stopped teaching full-time when Grace started school, though she never stopped being involved in education. She served on the school board, helped hire new teachers, organized events and fundraisers. She had made teaching her life's work, and even when she was not in the classroom, she was finding ways to support the children of Ordway. When they had been married for 10 years, Kieran took Lily back to the schoolhouse. It was a bright spring day, the kind of day when Colorado showed its gentler side, when wildflowers covered the plains and the air smelled of growing things. The schoolhouse was empty, it being Saturday, and they stood in the main room where so much of their story had unfolded. "You remember?" Kieran asked, pulling her close. "How could I forget?" Lily leaned her head against his shoulder, her arms wrapped around his waist. "I remember being so cold I thought I might never be warm again. I remember the sound of the door opening and thinking it might be death coming for me. And then it was you." I almost did not make it, almost turned back a dozen times. But you did not. You kept coming and you saved my life. You saved mine too, just in a different way." She looked up at him, her green eyes soft. "I love you, Kieran Knox. I loved you then in that moment when you fell through the door half frozen and determined. And I love you now even more if that is possible." "It is possible," he said. "Because I feel the same way. Every year with you has been better than the last. Every day I wake up grateful that the storm brought us together. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had stayed in the saloon, if you had not come for me?" He considered that, thinking about the alternate version of his life that might have existed. A life of solitude and loneliness, of wandering from place to place without purpose. A life without Lily, without James and Grace, without the family that had given him a reason to be more than he had been. "I think I would have spent the rest of my life regretting it," he said honestly. "I think I would have always wondered, always felt like I had missed something important. But I did not stay. I came for you, and you gave me everything I did not know I needed." They kissed then, soft and familiar, a kiss that spoke of years together and years still to come. Outside, they could hear the sounds of Ordway going about its business, the laughter of children, the rumble of wagons, the life of a thriving community. And Kieran thought about how much had changed since that terrible winter day when he had walked out into a blizzard on nothing but instinct and hope. He had found his purpose. He had found his home. He had found love. When James was 16, he announced his intention to join Kieran in running the ranch full-time, foregoing any plans for college or city life. Kieran was proud, though he made sure James understood the hard work involved, the sacrifices that would be required. But James was determined, and he had inherited his father's quiet strength and his mother's intelligence. Kieran knew his son would do well. Grace, on the other hand, wanted to follow in her mother's footsteps and become a teacher. At 14, she was already helping at the school, working with the younger children, showing a natural gift for education. Lily beamed with pride whenever she watched Grace with her students, seeing her own passion reflected in her daughter. The town of Ordway continued to grow, becoming more established as the railroad expanded and more settlers arrived. The schoolhouse was eventually replaced by a larger building, one that could accommodate the growing number of children, and Lily was instrumental in designing the curriculum and hiring staff. She became known throughout the region as an authority on education, her opinion sought by school boards from surrounding counties. Kieran's ranch prospered as well. He was a fair employer, known for treating his workers well, and he had a reputation for honesty and reliability that made him a respected member of the community. He was elected to the town council and served several terms, always fighting for what he believed was right, always putting the good of Ordway first. But more than any professional success, more than any material prosperity, what mattered most to Kieran was his family. Every evening, when he came home to find Lily waiting, when he sat down to dinner with his children and listened to them talk about their days, when he crawled into bed beside the woman he loved and felt her curl against him, he knew he was the richest man alive. They added another bedroom to the cabin as the children grew, and then another, until it was no longer really a cabin but a proper house. Kieran built most of it himself, with James helping, and it became a labor of love, every board and nail a testament to the family they had built. When Grace was 18, she left to attend normal school in Denver, training to become a certified teacher. It was hard, watching their daughter leave, but they were proud of her ambition and determination. She returned 2 years later with her certificate, and immediately took a position at the Ordway School, working alongside the mother who had inspired her. James married at 23, a sweet-natured girl from a neighboring ranch named Sarah, and they built a house on the edge of Kieran's land. Within a year, they had given Kieran and Lily their first grandchild, a boy they named Kieran after his grandfather. Holding that baby, seeing his name carried forward into another generation, Kieran felt the weight of history and legacy in a way he never had before. He thought about his own father, lost to drink and despair, and made a silent promise to his grandson that he would be better, that he would be present and loving and everything his own father had not been able to be. He would break the cycle of loneliness and loss, would create a new legacy of love and family. Lily retired from teaching when she was 55, after more than 30 years of shaping young minds. The town threw her a celebration that drew people from all over the region, former students who came to thank her, parents who credited her with changing their children's lives. She was presented with a plaque and gifts, but what mattered most to her was seeing the faces of those she had taught, knowing that she had made a difference. "I did good work," she said to Kieran that night as they sat on the porch and watched the stars. "Did I not?" "The best," he agreed, taking her hand. "You changed this town, Lily. You changed hundreds of lives. You certainly changed mine. We changed each other's. That is what love does. It transforms us into better versions of ourselves." Kieran thought about the man he had been before the blizzard, solitary and wary, convinced that he was meant to walk through life alone. And he thought about the man he had become, a husband and father and grandfather, a pillar of his community, someone who had learned that opening your heart was not weakness but the greatest strength of all. "I am glad you got trapped in that storm," he said, and Lily laughed. "That is a terrible thing to say. You know what I mean. I am glad that I had a reason to come for you, glad that we had those days together. It is strange, is it not, how the worst moments of our lives can lead to the best things? It is not strange at all. Adversity reveals who we really are, and we are strongest when we face it together. That storm did not just trap me, Kieran. It set us both free." They sat in comfortable silence, their hands intertwined, their bodies close. They were both graying now, their faces lined with the years they had lived, their bodies showing the wear of hard work and time. But they were still them, still the school teacher and the cowboy who had found each other in the midst of a blizzard and had chosen to build a life together. Grace married when she was 26, a fellow teacher from another district, and they settled in Ordway to raise their own family. Soon Kieran and Lily were surrounded by grandchildren, the house full of noise and laughter whenever the family gathered. Sunday dinners became a tradition, everyone coming together to share food and stories, the table so crowded they had to add extensions to fit everyone. Kieran would sit at the head of the table, looking at the faces of his children and grandchildren, and feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude. This was his legacy. Not the ranch, not the land, but these people, this family that had grown from the love he and Lily had built. When they had been married for 40 years, the town of Ordway held a celebration in their honor. It was held in the new community center, and it seemed like the entire population turned out to honor the school teacher and the cowboy whose love story had become local legend. There were speeches and presentations, stories told and retold about the blizzard and the dramatic rescue, about the years of service both Kieran and Lily had given to the community. But the part that meant the most to Kieran was when his children and grandchildren stood up to speak. James talked about his father's quiet strength and integrity, about the lessons he had learned working beside him on the ranch. Grace spoke about her mother's passion for education and her father's unwavering support, about growing up in a home filled with love and laughter. The grandchildren, some of them teenagers now, talked about family dinners and stories around the fire, about feeling safe and loved. "My grandparents taught us that love is not just a feeling," one of the grandsons said, his voice thick with emotion. "It is a choice you make every day. It is showing up for each other, no matter what. It is building something together that is stronger than anything you could build alone." Kieran had to wipe his eyes, and beside him, Lily was openly crying. They held hands tightly, overwhelmed by the outpouring of love and respect, humbled by the impact they had made. That night back in their home, they lay in bed and talked about the evening, about how far they had come from those desperate days in the schoolhouse. "You have any regrets?" Lily asked, her head resting on his shoulder. Kieran thought about it, really considered the question. He thought about the years of loneliness before he met her, about the hard choices and difficult times, about the losses and struggles they had faced. But when he weighed it all against what he had gained, there was no contest. "Not a single one," he said. "Every moment, good and bad, led me to you, led us to this life. How could I regret any of it? I feel the same way. Sometimes I wonder what that younger version of me would think if she could see this, see what became of the terrified schoolteacher trapped in a blizzard. I think she would be amazed. She was brave, that girl. She did not give up, even when things looked hopeless. She fought for survival, and then she fought for love. I think she would be proud of the woman she became." Lily turned to look at him, her green eyes still bright despite the lines at the corners. "I am proud of us, of what we built together. We made a good life, Kieran Knox." "The best life," he agreed and kissed her softly. "And it is not over yet. We still have years ahead of us." They did have years, good years filled with more grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren, filled with watching their family grow and thrive. Kieran eventually stepped back from running the ranch, turning operations over to James while he took on an advisory role. He spent his days working on smaller projects, fixing things around the property, teaching his grandchildren to ride and rope, passing on the skills and knowledge he had accumulated over a lifetime. Lily spent her retirement reading voraciously, tending her garden and volunteering at the school library. She never really stopped teaching, always ready with a book recommendation or a patient explanation, always encouraging young minds to reach further, dream bigger. They took walks together every evening, weather permitting, strolling along the creek or out to the meadow where wildflowers bloomed in the spring. They talked about everything and nothing, their conversation as easy and natural as breathing. And sometimes they did not talk at all, just walked hand in hand, content in each other's presence. On their 50th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a massive celebration. 3 generations were present, from James and Grace down to the newest great-grandchild, a baby girl named Lily after her great-grandmother. The house and yard were full of people, the air filled with laughter and music, and Kieran stood on the porch looking out at all of it, feeling the weight and wonder of a life well lived. James came to stand beside him, gray-haired now himself, his own grandchildren running around the yard. "Hell of a party, Dad. Hell of a life," Kieran replied. "You and Mom set a high bar. I hope Sarah and I can make it this far." "You will. You love each other, you work together, you put family first. That is all it takes. Is it really that simple?" Kieran smiled, thinking about all the complexity hidden within that simplicity. The compromises and sacrifices, the endless small choices to choose love over pride, togetherness over independence. No, it is the hardest thing in the world, but it is also the most worthwhile. Later, after the party had wound down and most of the family had gone home, Kieran and Lily sat on the porch swing and watched the sun set over the mountains. The sky was painted in brilliant shades of orange and pink, the kind of sunset that made you believe in beauty and hope. 50 years, Lily said softly. Can you believe it? Feels like yesterday and also like forever. I would do it all again, every moment. I would choose you every single time. I know, Kieran said, pulling her close, because I would choose you too. In every lifetime, in every circumstance, I would walk through that blizzard to find you. They sat in silence as the stars began to appear, one by one, in the darkening sky. They were old now, their bodies showing the wear of decades, but their love was as strong as it had ever been. Stronger, even, tempered by time and tested by life. Kieran thought about the young man he had been, sitting in that saloon and making the decision to walk out into a storm that should have killed him. He thought about the terror and determination, the way he had kept putting one foot in front of the other because the alternative was unthinkable. And he thought about what he had found on the other side of that hell, the woman who had become his entire world. "Thank you," he said suddenly. "For what?" "For being worth saving, for saving me right back, for building this life with me, for everything." Lily turned to kiss him, and in that kiss was 50 years of love and partnership, of struggles overcome and joys shared. When they pulled apart, they were both smiling through tears. "We did good, did we not?" she asked. "Better than good," Kieran replied. "We did something extraordinary." They sat on that porch until the stars were bright overhead, holding each other close, grateful for every moment they had been given. And when they finally went inside, they went together, the way they had faced everything for the past 50 years. Together. The seasons continued to turn, and Kieran and Lily grew older, their steps slower, their bodies more frail. But their minds remained sharp, and their love remained constant. They faced the challenges of aging the way they had faced everything else, with grace and humor and unwavering support for each other. When Kieran was 78, he had a scare with his heart that landed him in the hospital in Pueblo for a week. Lily never left his side, sleeping in a chair beside his bed, holding his hand through every difficult moment. The doctors said he was lucky, that he needed to slow down, take it easier. Kieran agreed, though both he and Lily knew that slowing down was not really in his nature. But he did try for her sake. He spent more time on the porch, more time with the grandchildren, more time simply being present in the moment rather than always working toward the next task. And he found that it was good, this slower pace, this focus on quality rather than quantity. Lily had her own health troubles, arthritis that made her hands ache and her joints stiff. But she refused to let it stop her, adapting her activities, finding new ways to do the things she loved. She started writing down family stories, creating a chronicle of their life together for future generations. She filled notebooks with memories and anecdotes, her handwriting shaky but determined. One evening, as they sat together and she read him some of what she had written, Kieran was struck by how lucky they had been. Not just in finding each other, but in being given so many years together, so many opportunities to love and be loved. "Promise me something," Lily said, setting aside her notebook. "Anything. Promise me that you will be all right when I am gone, that you will not close yourself off again, will not retreat into that solitude you used to wear like armor. Do not talk like that. You are not going anywhere. We are both old, Kieran. We have been blessed with long lives, but they are not infinite. I need to know that you will be okay." He was quiet for a long moment, struggling with the thought of a world without Lily in it. It was unimaginable, unbearable. But he knew she needed this reassurance, needed to know that the man she loved would continue on, would not let grief destroy him. "I promise," he said finally. "I promise I will stay connected to our family, will keep living the life we built together. But Lily, if you go first, you have to know that a part of me will go with you. And a part of me will stay with you. Always. In every sunset, in every memory, in the faces of our children and grandchildren, I will never really be gone." They held each other close, both crying now, facing the inevitable truth that their time together, however long and beautiful it had been, would eventually end. But that end was not yet. They had several more good years, years of family gatherings and quiet moments, of watching great-grandchildren grow and seeing the family legacy continue. They celebrated birthdays and holidays, attended weddings and baptisms, and were present for all the important moments of their large, thriving family. On a warm September afternoon, when Kieran was 81 and Lily was 80, they took a walk together along the creek. It was a beautiful day, the kind of day when Colorado showed its very best, with clear blue skies and a gentle breeze that rustled through the cottonwood trees. They walked slowly, arm in arm, stopping frequently to rest and admire the view. "This is where James proposed to Sarah," Lily said, pointing to a bend in the creek, "and where Grace used to play as a child. And where I kissed you for the 100th time," Kieran added, smiling at the memory. "Or maybe the 1,000th, I lost count." They sat down on a bench that James had built for them years ago, positioned to overlook the water. Lily leaned against Kieran's shoulder and he wrapped his arm around her, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching the creek flow past. "I have been thinking," Lily said after a while, "about the blizzard, about that moment when you came through the door. Do you know what I thought? That I was crazy for coming out in that storm," she laughed softly. "Well, yes, but also I thought I was seeing an angel. You were covered in ice, barely able to stand, but you had come for me. You had risked everything for me. And I remember thinking that I must be important to someone, that I must matter, for someone to do something so extraordinary. You mattered. You have always mattered. From the first moment I saw you, even though we had never spoken, I knew you were special. I knew you were worth any risk. I spent so much of my early life feeling invisible. My father loved his students more than his daughter. My mother died before we could really know each other, and I came west feeling like I had something to prove. But you saw me. You saw me when I could not see myself. I saw you," Kieran confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. "I saw your courage and your kindness and your brilliant mind. I saw all of you and I loved all of you. I love you too. I have loved you for 58 years, and I will love you for whatever time we have left, and beyond that." They stayed at the creek until the sun began to set, painting the sky in colors that seemed almost too beautiful to be real. And then they walked home together, hand in hand, their steps slow but steady, their hearts full. That night Lily fell asleep in Kieran's arms, her head on his chest, her breathing soft and even. And she did not wake up. Kieran knew immediately, even before he fully surfaced from sleep. He knew from the stillness, from the subtle change in the weight of her against him. He held her for a long time, this woman who had been his entire world, tears streaming down his face as he said goodbye. The funeral was held on a bright autumn day, the kind of day Lily had always loved. It seemed like the entire town of Ordway turned out, along with former students from across the region, family and friends spanning 3 generations. The service was held at the church, and then they buried her in the town cemetery, beneath a cottonwood tree with a view of the mountains. Kieran stood at the graveside surrounded by his family, and he felt the loss like a physical wound. But he also felt gratitude, immense and overwhelming gratitude for the life they had shared, for every moment they had been given. He thought about the promise he had made to her to keep living, to stay connected, and he knew that he would honor it. Not because it was easy, but because she had asked it of him, and he had never been able to deny her anything. In the days and weeks that followed, Kieran learned how to live with grief. It was not easy. There were moments when he would turn to tell Lily something and remember she was not there, moments when the loneliness threatened to swallow him whole. But he had his family, and they rallied around him with love and support. James and Sarah insisted he come for dinner several times a week. Grace visited almost daily, bringing books and conversation. The grandchildren stopped by with their children, filling the house with noise and life. And slowly, painfully, Kieran found a new rhythm. He spent time working on small projects around the ranch, teaching his great-grandchildren skills he wanted to pass on. He read the notebooks Lily had filled with family stories, adding his own memories and anecdotes. He attended church and town council meetings, staying active in the community that had been such an important part of their life together. On what would have been their 59th wedding anniversary, Kieran walked out to the cemetery and sat beside Lily's grave. He brought flowers, wildflowers like the ones that had covered the plains on their wedding day, and he talked to her the way he always had. "I miss you," he said simply. "Every day, every moment I miss you, but I am keeping my promise. I am staying connected to the family, to the life we built. They are good people, Lily. Our children, our grandchildren, all of them. You would be so proud." He sat there for a long time, feeling the warmth of the sun on his face, listening to the wind in the trees. And he felt, somehow, that she was with him still, that the love they had built was not erased by death, but transformed, becoming something that would last beyond their individual lives. Kieran lived for 2 more years after Lily's passing. They were good years, peaceful years, filled with family and memories, and the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived. He saw the birth of 2 more great-great-grandchildren, holding them in his arms and marveling at the continuation of the family line. He celebrated his 83rd birthday surrounded by 4 generations, and he felt blessed beyond measure. When his time came, it was gentle and easy. He simply went to sleep one night and did not wake up, his heart finally giving out after 8 decades of faithful service. They buried him beside Lily, beneath the same cottonwood tree, and the entire town mourned the passing of a man who had been a quiet pillar of their community. At the funeral, James spoke about his father's legacy, about the lessons of integrity and hard work, about the love that had been the foundation of everything. Grace read from her mother's notebooks, stories of the blizzard and the days that followed, of a love that had been born in crisis and had endured through every challenge life could throw at it. And the great-grandchildren, some of them now parents themselves, talked about the family that Kieran and Lily had built, about the values they had instilled, about the love that continued to ripple outward through the generations. The ranch continued, passed down to James and then to his children. The schoolhouse, long since replaced, became a historical landmark, a reminder of the town's early days and the teacher who had made such a difference. And the story of Kieran Knox and Lily Sutherland, of the cowboy who rode through a blizzard to save the schoolteacher and found love on the other side of hell, became the kind of story that parents told their children, a reminder that courage and love could overcome any obstacle. Years later, decades later, when great-great-grandchildren walked along the creek or rode across the plains, they would think of their ancestors and the love story that had started their family line. They would remember the lessons passed down through the generations. That love is a choice made daily. That family is the greatest legacy. That courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. And on cold winter nights, when the wind howled across the Colorado plains, they would tell the story of the blizzard, of the schoolteacher trapped alone, and the quiet cowboy who risked everything to reach her. They would tell of the days spent huddled together in the little schoolhouse, of the love that grew in the midst of crisis, of the family that was built on the foundation of that extraordinary beginning. It was a good story, a true story, and it was theirs. It was the story of Kieran Knox and Lily Sutherland, two people who found each other in the worst of circumstances and built something beautiful that lasted long after they were gone. It was a story of love and courage, of sacrifice and devotion, of two souls who were meant to find each other even if it took a blizzard to bring them together. And it was a story that would be told for generations to come, a reminder that true love, the kind that lasts, is always worth fighting for, worth risking everything to find, and worth cherishing every single day you are blessed enough to have it.